Today is April 16th, 2014, and Joe Turner and myself, Judy Meyer, are talking with Terry and Alice Schofner. Is that how you pronounce your name?
That is correct.
And I've known Alice from Pattonville High School drill team our daughters were on, but I don't know exactly what else you've done, and I don't know what Terry's done. So maybe we can start off by asking where the two of you grew up. Let's start with Terry. Where did you grow up, Terry?
I grew up on the east side of the river.
Really?
Actually in National City. Went to East St. Louis school system. I'm a graduate of East St. Louis Senior High School.
Wow.
And after I went through the Navy, went to Rolla for an engineering degree, came to St. Louis, worked for an insurance company in fire insurance business, then went to work for Monsanto, worked for them for about 20 years, and then I've worked for a couple construction companies since then, and I'm mostly retired.
Well, quite a variety of things and places you've covered. And were you living here in this present house in Bridgeton for most of that time?
Alice and I have been married for about the last 20 years. Prior to that, I lived in the Carrollton subdivision on Weston Court, which still exists, but the house and all the houses in that area have completely been demolished.
That's sad. Were you given any choice, or was the airport buyout, is that what it was all about?
Actually, my first wife and I moved out of that house prior to the airport buyout, but just prior to it.
Oh, I see. I see. And did you have children that went to school in the area?
I have a daughter and a son, and they both went to school in Bonfils, which was right on Gist Road, if memory serves me correctly.
I think you're right, but that was actually Hazelwood School District, I believe.
It was.
Okay,
You're correct.
you were really on the border, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And then did they go to Hazelwood High School?
My daughter went to Hazelwood High School, and my son, because his mother worked for the Pattonville School District, went to school at Pattonville High School.
Oh, okay. All righty. Now you say you're semi-retired. What kind of work are you still doing?
I'm a registered professional engineer, and I do review drawings for primarily fire protection.
Oh. For any particular district?
I do it for a particular company by the name of AR and Fire Protection.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you. And Alice, where did you grow up?
Well, when I was first born, we lived in University City, and then I moved to the Bridgeton area when I was about 3.
Really?
And we lived right on St. Charles Rock Road, but I don't recall it being called Bridgeton. Our address was Route 1, Box 18, Robertson, Missouri.
Oh.
And then a couple of years later, they changed it to Box 94, but it was still Robertson was the mailing address. And
what's at that location now?
well, at that location now on St. Charles Rock Road is the Highway 70 interchange. Where
There's
70,
one closer to us here.
Pardon me?
There are 2 interchanges with 70, right?
The one that is just right across almost right across the street from us,
by
where
Walmart.
we are. Yes, by Walmart. It's right next to Shamel
Okay.
Auto Body or
So you're
Shamel.
closer to Shameless.
Yes. When I was 10, the the highway department was building Highway 70, and so Highway 70 bought the front half of my parents' property. They owned a 3.5 acre long skinny lot, and so the highway department bought the front half, and then we actually had the house moved to the back half of
Wow.
the lot.
Wow.
And that's when Mark Twain Lane was built to accommodate the few people that did that. The people that lived right next door did that. And then where Shamel Auto Body or Shamel Repair was the next house over. The Woods family, I think, lived there. And so if you go in there, there's a house in there, and then they've built stuff all around it for their company. But when we moved the house back to the back of the lot, we'd had pigs there before. My father always said that, you know, the ground was fertile, it was great, and if pigs could live there, then it would be a great place for us. So, you know, I disagreed, but my sister and I were not thrilled by the move. And we did not have electricity, and we did not have plumbing or water when we first moved the house back. And my father had built a basement and so on, and it was ready for the house to be, you know, was brought on jacks and then rolled down the hill. And so we had, the water we had was, we had a hose from our old house, you know, where the water line was still there, and it would come down the hill and then back to where our house was. But remember, the highway was being built, so we had all of these earth-moving machines going through all the time, and as we would say, they would leave their bottom down, and then they would scrape and cut our water line.
Oh.
So in the middle of the summer, this was that way all summer. This is our problem. And for plumbing, we had another lot next to our lot that my father had bought, and so we had a shovel over there, and we would go to the bathroom over there in the lot and then use the shovel. And then we had no electricity, so, you know, you just went to bed when it got dark. And the problem with the electricity was that where the line had to come through, there was one family that said that they would not allow our electric line to go across their property. So it was delayed. I think they finally rescinded, but it was most of the summer with no electricity. And to get water, we had to actually have the water company put in the line, and we had to pay for it. And then later on, as years went by, other people in the area hooked on and then paid us for them to get water, because we paid for the whole water line.
How old were you at this time, at this summer?
I was 10.
10.
I was 10 when the house was moved. And then when I was 12, and it was in February, and we were in church. Oh, and I had gone to school in University City, because my parents were both University City teachers.
Oh?
And so we went to school there, and at that time University City was a very top-notch school, and Pattonville was, you know, still in the Hicks, you know, it was still a country school. But when I was in 7th grade, I talked to my parents into letting me come to Pattonville, because, you know, I was driving in there with them, and you didn't have the camaraderie of your friends and so on.
And that was still on St. Charles Rock
Yes,
Road?
high school. Well, this was 7th grade, and it was the junior high, which is Holman now. And the high school was still next door, yes. So I started in 7th grade in January at semester. And then in February of that same year, my house burned to the ground.
What house?
The house that we had moved when I was 10, then
goodness.
burned. We were at church. We went to Fifi Baptist Church, and we were there on a Sunday morning. And the way the story goes, a neighbor had someone, the other house that had been moved back when I was 10, they had somebody come to visit, and they got out of the car and ran into their house, and the other family said, "Why are you in such a hurry?" And they said, "Is it that cold?" Well, it was 2 below zero that morning. But the man said, "Are you just going to let your neighbor's house burn down?" And they looked out, and it was all aflame. I mean, it was a 2-story house, and there were, you know, fire out all the windows and everything. And so I always remember that I was at church, and you started hearing all these sirens, but you don't ever think about the sirens that it's your house that's
Right.
burning down.
Right.
My mother sang in the choir, and somebody came and got my mom out of the choir loft, and by the end of the service, my dad had left and my mom had left, and I was sitting with my girlfriends, and I was 12, and I was clueless. It hadn't really dawned on me. My parents had figured it out, but I hadn't, and so they called my sister and I out after church to tell us privately, while they told the whole church, that our house had burned down. So it had burned to the ground. We actually got a bulldozer and scooped out the findings. My mother kept saying, "I know there's good silverware in there. There ought to be at least," and I think maybe she found one spoon.
Wow.
So we had wonderful neighbors and all kinds of people that helped us to house us, give us food. We the Blakes, Gertrude and Edgar Blake, who were the administrator of the Missouri Baptist Children's Home, were good friends, and so we lived at their house for 2 weeks while we found housing. And on Mark Twain, the very first house when you turn into Mark Twain off of the Rock Road, if you went straight ahead, that was the McKee's house, Harry McKee, and he and I think his brother owned a building construction company, and they built homes over in the Woodson Terrace area, and so they loaned us a house that I don't remember if we rented it or whatever, but it was right on where Woodson and Natural Bridge and the airport all come together now. I don't even know if those houses are there. But we lived there for about 6 months while my father, who was an industrial arts teacher, he and friends rebuilt the house, changed the floor plan completely and so on, but same footings, same foundation. The concrete, the concrete brick basement that my father had built 2 years before was pretty much rubble because of the heat, so they actually had to put in a new basement. But the perimeter of the house was the same. So that's the big thing that happened to me as a kid when I was 10 and again when I was 12. I graduated from Pattonville High School. Back then when my house burned down, my homeroom gave me clothes and saddle Oxfords, because I had nothing, absolutely nothing to wear except what I had on at church that day. So a lot of people were very nice. The church, Fifi gave they had a shower of linens, so we had blankets and pillows and that kind of stuff from the whole church. And so anyhow, about 6 months later, we moved into a brand new house, and it is still there on Mark Twain. My parents are both dead, and but they lived there until, 25 years ago, and then my sister lived there, and her husband, and now I think people live there that are associated with the church. What's the name of the church right here?
New Life or something?
New Life, Pentecost.
now this has been a fascinating story, and I really never knew this about your past, but could you clarify that? Just how do you think the fire started?
Well, there was a lot of discussion with that, and because they had a fireplace, people just knew that the fire. I think we'd had a fire in the fireplace that day, but after the whole fire was over, there was still like a log in the fireplace. So people do not think it really started from the fire in the fireplace. Now people at that time said that. They think was probably some electrical something. It was an old house when it was moved back, and I don't know what all was done electrically. My father added on to it when we moved it, added a 2-car garage with a whole room over it. And the firemen shot water, in the one room above the the one room above the garage did not burn. It was, I guess, separated enough from the rest of the house. And so the firemen put a lot of water in there. Now it was 2 below zero, so everything froze. And my mother had a set of ceramic, like earthenware dishes that were on shelves in there. And they were all frozen to the shelves.
Oh my gosh.
And so the neighbors or my parents would come by every day, and if anything had loosened, then they would take it off and take it. And they also drilled holes in the floor of that room so that the ice, when it melted, could drain and, not just sit in the room. So that room had a huge fireplace, all stone, and I'm sure to this day the mortar is a lot darker at the bottom than it is at the top because of the smoke. They scrubbed it and cleaned it and so on, but still there was a lot of discoloration of the mortar. And so that one room was saved, but the rest of the house was not.
Wow, what a fantastic story. I never knew
It
that.
was,
And
it was front page on the Post-Dispatch, and my
what
father.
year do you think this was?
What year? 57, I think
Okay.
it was.
Remember the date?
February
kinda
the
just-
16th, I think.
Okay.
February 16th. My sister had just been to some Valentine, dance at school. We both had on, I had on little flats, and the skirt I had on was kind of a funny story. My mother taught first grade in University City, and at that time there were a lot of students whose parents owned different companies, and this man had a company that made poodle skirts.
Oh yeah.
And so they were felt, and they were
Right.
made out of a circle.
Right.
And so he gave my mother a whole lot of felt from the leftover parts of the circle, out of a rectangular piece of material. And so she took those rectangular parts and sewed them together to make a gourd skirt for me. So the cost of my skirt was the price of the zipper. Okay? And then, I don't remember what shirt I had on, but I had these little kind of shiny black flat shoes, which were of no value in 2 below zero
Yeah,
weather at that
right,
time. But I was
yes.
going to church, so it was the joke was that I wore the cheapest skirt I had.
Oh wow.
Had no other clothes to wear.
Oh my
So every
goodness.
night at the Blake's house, people would give us things, and then we always had to go through them before we went to bed to see if there was anything we could wear the next day to school. And my mother was 5 foot tall, and she always said, these people that give me stuff must be at least 6 foot tall. They're always having to hem something
Right.
or fix something. So
Right.
yeah.
Oh my goodness, how traumatic. Wow.
it was. It was traumatic.
Wow.
You always remember that when you see a fire.
And you just had the one sister.
I just have one sister who also went to Pattonville. She graduated in 1960, and I graduated in 63. And then I went to college at Cape Girardeau, Southeast Missouri State. And before I graduated, when I was a senior looking for a job, Pattonville wanted me to become a teacher in Pattonville, and I was like, I've been to Pattonville. Why don't I do something different? But at that time, I was dating Ed Robbins, and we were going to get married, and he decided that he was going to teach in Pattonville. My mother said, well, you ought to teach in the same district so you'll have the same holidays and vacations. So I said, okay. And Vernon Bodie, who was the man who hired you at that time, was down at school, and he hired me without seeing my transcript.
Wow.
And he told me that some years later, I didn't even see your transcript. And of course I'd gone to Pattonville, and
You had good grades at Pattonville?
yeah.
So he was going on that.
he knew.
And what did he hire you for? Elementary or secondary? or
Yes,
what?
I taught at Carrollton. The first 2 and a fourth years. I taught at Carrollton, and then my husband was drafted. He taught at Pattonville Heights, and he was drafted, and so then he was stationed in the Washington D.C. area. So after the second year, the third year, the first part of it, the 1/4 a year, then I put in my resignation and went to Washington D.C. and lived there, and then taught in Arlington, Virginia for about a year and a half. Moved back, and then I taught at St. Anne, which was part of Pattonville, was a Pattonville school, for 10 years. And at that time had all 3 of my children while I taught at St. Anne. And we built the house that we live in now while we were there. And then St. Anne closed, and I moved to Bridgeway and taught at Bridgeway for the next 19 years.
Wow. When, what grades did you teach there?
I taught 4th grade 1 year, and then I went back to 1st grade, and then I taught 2nd grade about 10 years, maybe 15, yeah, probably about 10 years.
Well, tell us about your daughters. All daughters, correct?
I have 3 daughters, Michelle, Christy, and Allison. They all went to Pattonville, and they were all very active in Pattonville. They went to Bridgeway Elementary and Pattonville Heights, and then Pattonville High School. They all went to college. They are all married. They all live in this area now.
Really?
They didn't.
Wow.
They haven't always, but Michelle, my oldest, lived in California for about 5 years, and then they moved back here. And she has a degree in commercial art. No, what's it called? Graphic arts. And she is a stay-at-home mom right now. She has 4 children. And then my middle daughter went to University of Missouri, Kansas City Medical School. And so that's a 6-year program right from high school. And so when she was about, 23 years old, she was a doctor.
Wow.
And the joke was that she could write you a prescription, but she wasn't old enough to rent a car.
What kind of doctor? What's her specialty?
She's board certified in family practice, but she has her own practice, private practice, and she does a lot of weight loss and hormone replacement and Botox and stuff like that. She's had her own practice for a year and a half, about a year and a half. She did do some urgent care stuff, and thought about going into that, but decided to do this private practice. Seems to be doing well. My youngest daughter, Allison, is a elementary school librarian in the Parkway District. She's at Riverbend Elementary, and is married, has 2 children. So I have 9 grandchildren, and Terry has 2, so we have 11.
Oh my.
11 altogether.
Wow.
So we're having a big Easter egg hunt here this
Really?
weekend.
Wow, I hope it's nice weather.
We do a kid Easter egg hunt, and we also do an adult Easter egg
Oh,
hunt
really?
for all the 30 and 40-year-old children and in-laws.
You hide eggs for the adults?
Terry hides them, and he is very good at hiding them. We have at least 2 or 3 eggs every year that are not found.
Yeah, that happens in our family as well.
I may find them in June or
Right,
July.
right. My sister-in-law will say, months later, "Oh, we found your son's egg." We are not far at all from the path of the 2 years ago Good Friday tornado. Did that have any damage here, or what happened in this area? Because you are close to the area, right?
Yes, we were home, and we went to the basement. Terry says that on the TV they said it was in Maryland Heights, and he said we better get to the basement. So we went to the basement, and we were down there, and all of a sudden you heard this big whoom. It was about that fast. And I said, you think it's over? You think it's that? What should we do? And he, laughing, I meant, what should we do? Like, should we sit in the basement
Right.
longer? Should we go up and see if the house is
Right.
there? Should we, that kind of thing. Of course, there was no power. And I think he thought, like, what else is there to do?
We're in the basement.
But, yeah, his thought was, we can't go any lower, So we went up, came upstairs, and the room was still here.
The roof was still here.
It was barely light outside, and so we looked out, and there were trees down everywhere. And people were starting to come outside. There were trees across the street, quite a few trees across the street, and most everything that was in our backyard was now in our neighbor's backyard or farther. And the neighbors, we found out the next day, because we couldn't, it got dark really quickly, and we couldn't see enough, but they had some 2x4 or something into their roof. We had damage on the roof, we had to get a new roof. We had trees uprooted, trees completely gone, and we had branches from some trees turned upside down in other trees. And as you went farther down the street, it's a little dead-end street, but the farther you went down the street, the worse the damage. And so, like, a lot of people down there had a lot worse damage. If we have time, I could tell you something about the building of this house. When I was in Washington, D.C., my father decided to sell lots up here. And so this was some property that he owned. We always called it On the Hill from Mark Twain Lane. And so he and Denver Abernathy, who lived on Old St. Charles, they decided to subdivide together. And my father had 9 lots, and Denver Abernathy had 14. And so they built the streets and the sewer and did everything that Bridgeton told them to do. Of course, we used to tease them because the streets are fairly narrow, and my father always said, that's what they told me to do, so that's why they're this size. But anyhow, he started selling lots, and so we came home one time and went, wait a minute, maybe we'd like to buy a lot. And so we bought this lot from my father, and then we owned it for a couple of years before we did anything, and then we designed the house and worked on designing the house. And then Marlon Henley, who lives at the end of this street, was also a University City industrial arts teacher, and my father and he were friends. And so we had some of Marlon Henley's students actually do the blueprints. These are high school kids.
Oh my goodness.
And in their blueprint class, is that what you call it? What the
Industrial arts, I guess.
Well, it was a class where they learned to draw.
Wow.
Industrial drawing.
And so then essentially my father, his name is Bailey Burkhead too, we had never said that, and he and Marlon Henley built the house. And they started over spring break because they were both still teaching, and then they worked on it all summer. And they also took movies. At that time, there weren't videos or any of that. Marlon took movies of it and then used it in his class every year. Of this is how you design, on paper, and now here it is going up.
Wonderful.
So the house was, built with the help of high school seniors, and then they got to come out sometime or other and look at it to see how it worked out with what they helped to design and to draw on paper.
Well, you certainly have been surrounded by people in education, and then you yourself, and then 1 or 2 of your daughters
Just one.
in education as well.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
quite.
That's,
Um,
and I always say that, I went to Pattonville, I taught in Pattonville, my kids all went to Pattonville, and I always say I bleed green and white. I think I have a reunion committee meeting next week, so
what year did you graduate, did you say?
1963.
Okay. Well, I think that's wonderful and it's fun to hear. Let me just ask you something though. Was it scary while the tornado was gone to think that you might lose this house, having had the experience of losing a house as a young girl?
I didn't even think about
Oh,
that.
okay.
It didn't,
Just wondered.
yeah, didn't come through me. You know, I think the thing you think about is, what should I have taken to the basement
Right,
with me?
yes.
And mainly it's pictures,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yes.
More than couches and, you know, stuff like that.
Right.
It's more the memorabilia that you'd like to keep.
Right. Right.
Because I don't have much memorabilia from my childhood because of the house burning
Yeah,
down,
that's a
you know.
shame.
Baby pictures, that
Right,
kind of stuff.
oh.
Yeah.
Can you go to relatives and say, "Do you have?"
We had a couple of things that were in that one room, so and I have a couple of pictures,
Mm-hmm.
but that's okay. We're fine.
So you grew up in this area. What was this area like? You said that you actually witnessed the building of Highway 70. Was that
Yes.
exciting? Was that fun to see them coming
Well,
in?
as a kid, one of my big problems as a kid was my parents gave us a bicycle. My sister and I each had a bicycle. Now, the caterpillars building the road were, you know, going everywhere, and so we had a lot of what we called cat tracks, you know, with the mud. When the mud dried, then you tried to drive your bicycle over it, you know, like that. And so my father would have the privilege every weekend of screwing all the nuts and bolts back together on the bicycle because it would shake and shimmy and loosen everything. I don't remember much else about, it was looming because you look right out the door of the house after we moved it, and there was the interchange. We always said that the cloverleaf went through our living room. It actually went through the whole house
Wow.
if we hadn't moved it.
Wow.
But
So this cloverleaf was built early on.
Yes, and it was only a half a cloverleaf,
Okay.
if you remember.
Yeah, I remember.
And until a few years ago, you could not get on both ways. You know, most people that wanted to go the other direction when they got off on the Rock Road, they'd go up to Mark Twain and turn around and then go the other way. So
Are you still involved with Fifi Baptist Church?
no, after our divorce and me marrying Terry and all that, it kind of we haven't gone there for about the past 20 years.
I see.
But I grew up there, and I was married there the first time, and my kids all went to church there and so on. So
Tell me just a little bit about Dr. Blake, if you will.
okay, Edgar Elias Blake, Dr. Blake.
Exactly what was he a doctor of?
I think I really personally don't know.
He wasn't a physician.
No. He was a PhD of some sort. You know, he had been a teacher early in his career, and then I think he was at the children's home for about 20 years.
Where is
as
the children's home?
Missouri Baptist Children's Home on Fifi and Lindbergh. Many years ago, before Northwest Plaza was built, it was the Erastus Post family farm.
Thank you.
And Erastus Post had 2 daughters who were never married, but Erastus Post, I think, gave the property to the Missouri Baptist Children's Home, which was part of his farm, and to Fifi Baptist Church. And so that's why those 2 entities are right next to each other. Not that they are one and the same. A lot of people think that they are
Right.
all related and
Yes.
so on. And they're both Baptist,
Uh-huh.
but they are separate. And then after Erastus Post's 2 daughters died, I think is when the property was sold and Northwest Plaza was built. which it's now not built, which is really sad.
Yes, kind of gone full circle just
Yes.
about, isn't it?
It was great as an outdoor mall. I liked walking around it and so on.
And
It
you were
was,
very close.
yes, and it was built while I was in college. I
Oh,
can remember
boy.
coming home and saying, I need to go to Northland. I need to go to Northland shopping. And then it was like, oh no, I can go right here.
I grew up by Northland. I remember that one very well.
Okay.
And when I was in high school, Northwest Plaza was being built. It was quite the thing, wasn't it?
Yes,
We've
it
had
was.
many people we've asked about Northwest Plaza talk about it. When you drive by there now, what do you think?
Well, I think that it's sad that it's completely torn down. I think that maybe if it hadn't been enclosed, that it might still be here. Maybe the making it of an indoor mall, helped to its demise. I was on I don't think it was called a committee, but my daughter Christy was in the band, Pattonville's band, and they got a job of blowing up balloons for the opening of Northwest Plaza when it became an indoor mall. And at that time, it was supposed to be the largest balloon drop and be in the Guinness Book of Records. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
But they built a platform in one of the big open areas, and we sat in this platform like a loft, way up high, and blew up these balloons. And they were not helium. They
I was
were
gonna
just
ask
air.
you.
They were just air. I mean, we had tanks that we blew them up with, but you had to tie them.
Yeah, that's hard.
And
tying
every
balloons.
time you tied them, then your fingers, the skin would actually come off. Then we all had Band-Aids.
Yeah,
So the mothers and the band people would sit up there and blow up these balloons for hours and hours until your fingers bled.
Oh, that's hard tying balloons. That's
Yeah.
very hard.
So that's what I remember of the opening of the Northwest Plaza when it was became enclosed.
Right. Well, hopefully we'll get something that'll bring it back to life, maybe draw people.
I hope something. Yeah, we'll see what happens because they didn't tear down parts of it, so we'll see if anything goes in there. I still hear that Menards is going in there.
Right. Well, Terry, what do you think of Menards? Do we need a Menards in this area? I would like to ask Terry, since you did live in Carrollton, did you shop at Telsher Hardware?
I shopped at Telsher Hardware a tremendous amount. If you lived in Carrollton subdivision and you wanted something to work on your house, Kathleen would always have the right stuff for you, the right item, the right part, whatever. And she was always very, very good about providing either her or Julius and the right information and putting that part in or what it took, to maintain your house.
What about Brannicky? Did you go there?
No,
I went to Brannick's.
You went to Brannicky's.
that was too far away.
And let's see, how far is Brannicky from Telsher Hardware? Joe, what do you think? How many miles?
Probably 2 miles.
Yeah.
But you shop there, you say, Alice.
Yeah, my father always said that you would never, ever do a plumbing job, if you were going to do something on your house, plumbing wise, unless Brannick's was open. And it was always a 2-visit Brannicky visit to do
I
some
love
kind
it.
of plumbing. You had to
Or
go
more.
You had to go at least twice.
That's
And when I was a kid, you could walk to Brannick's from my house,
Mm-hmm.
and I was always totally embarrassed. My father would send me up there for something, and then the guys working there would go, "Well, is that a female part or a male part?" And I have no idea. And
Oh, my
I always thought they
gosh.
were saying that just to
Uh-huh.
be weird to me. I mean, I didn't have a clue that that's really what plumbing parts were called.
Well, Brannicky's changed over the years, hasn't it?
Right. It had, long ago, Brannick's, all the parking was in the back, and Brannick's was very close to the street, and it was in 3 parts. There was the grocery store, the hardware store, and the feed store. And And then when it burned, well, and I don't know exactly the whole exact story of, why the grocery store closed, but then it became pretty much all hardware store. And then when it burned, which I don't know when that was,
76, I think, isn't it?
76?
That's what I'm
Okay.
thinking.
Then they rebuilt it farther back on the lot and then put the parking in the front.
Bridgeton has had several fires when you think about it. Mrs. Telsher also had fire.
Yeah,
Right.
the store in Old Bridgeton, right?
Well, and then the one that finally closed her down in
Oh,
Carrollton.
in Carrollton. Okay.
And it was, I think, right before 4th of July one year.
Okay.
Was that also the cause of the Bayou Bell, what happened?
Oh, yeah.
A fire?
It burned.
Oh, okay.
So fires are dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever go to the Bayou Bell when it was in Bridgeton?
Yeah, that was like in the front of where Target is,
Mhm,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody was talking about that recently, and I could not remember the name. I said somebody was talking about it, and they told their children there was a boat there, and they said, "No, Mary, there couldn't have been a boat."
It does seem a little preposterous, doesn't it?
About where
We have a-
Fazoli's is,
We have yeah, it's right near the creek that goes
the
through.
creek. Yeah.
There was a
We
boat
have
in the creek.
photograph. We have a photograph of the Bayou Bell on a flatbed truck going past our driveway.
Oh, cool.
On its away from the river to the
Uh-huh.
its place of
To
its
its
eventual
dry
run.
dock.
Yeah, right.
Terry, did you ever eat there on the Bayou Bell?
Not that I can recall.
I don't believe I ever did as well. It was probably a little more expensive for us.
We used to eat almost every Tuesday at the mine.
What was
Yeah,
that?
that sounds familiar.
It's
Was that up at the
It's
Natural
where
Bridge Junction?
Vantage Credit Union is. Vantage
Oh,
Credit
okay.
Union
Yeah,
is
yeah,
now. Is that right?
Okay.
So,
Of Harmony Lane
Yeah.
Okay.
and the Rock Road,
Yeah,
and then
Very close to the St. John's Bank?
yeah.
across the street,
Right,
across
okay.
Harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And on Tuesday night they had some special, and you could get a really cheap steak and Texas toast. I remember my kids were real little, and my parents were still living here then, and they're still living in the area. And so we would all meet, along with John and Ruth Abraham would go there a lot. on
John and
Tuesdays.
Ruth Abraham, excuse me. We did interview him
Uh-huh.
shortly before he passed away. And we had a very, very nice visit with him.
And
He was-
we also have on the website the video of Ruth narrating the Fifi Cemetery
Yes,
tour.
I have a copy of that. And they were very, very good friends of my parents. They went on a lot of trips together.
Really?
And so on. And along with the Blakes too, the Edgar and Gertrude Blake. I was going to tell you Edgar and Gertrude Blake, Edgar, as the administrator of the children's home, was, you always saw him in a suit. He was always prim and proper. He, very much like that. And we did live at his house for 2 weeks. And so one time at church, before church, in the cornflake box was this strip of marbles, just like a little long strip, maybe 5-6 marbles. So I took them to church and I gave them to Dr. Blake. And I said, "Here, I thought maybe you lost your marbles." And everyone was just mortified. He loved it. He thought it was the neatest thing. I was probably 12, 13, 14 years old, and he thought that was the coolest thing that I brought them marbles for him. And he would mention that real often. Otherwise, I don't know that I would remember having
Did he
done
have
that.
children?
They never had any children. They did adopt one child who lived at the children's home, at the Missouri Baptist Children's Home, that she was just somebody that they said was having a lot of trouble, if I remember. And what can we do to help you? Well, I'll be happy to come live with you, she said. And they said, "Oh."
She
well.
ingratiated herself to them.
And they loved it.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. Now, I just want to mention here on our tape that you helped us out a couple of years ago at our Fifi Cemetery tour by talking about Dr. Blake, who is buried at Fifi Cemetery.
Yes.
And we appreciate your help with that.
My pleasure, because he was a good family friend.
Are your parents buried there?
No, my parents are buried near Winfield, Missouri, where my father's farm was.
Oh.
They moved there. It was my grandparents' farm, and my great grandparents' farm, on my father's side of the family.
Oh,
And
okay.
they moved there after they retired, and so, my father lived there 20 years. My mother just died this past September. She was 98.
Oh, really? Wow. And she was still living in the house there?
She was still living in the house in Winfield on the family farm.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Let me ask you, do you take part in any Bridgeton activities now?
Oh, I'm trying to think. What do we do?
4th of July parade.
Yeah, we usually go to the parade, and we have the grandchildren come to the parade. We've taken the grandchildren to the, breakfast with Santa.
Okay, sure.
And the She and Me Tea.
Oh,
little
yes.
Tea party thing.
Uh-huh.
With the girls. I don't know. I'm sure there's other things. I'm involved with the St. Louis Cordinals, which is a barbershop singing group, and we meet at Beautiful Savior over on Natural Bridge in Bridgeton. So a lot of people from Bridgeton are in that. It's a ladies singing group that is a cappella. I don't know, what else do we do in Bridgeton?
So it's just a ladies barbershop.
It is a ladies barbershop chorus.
Is that an unusual combination?
No, I mean, what's the name of the group that a lot of people, we're part of Harmony Incorporated, which is a international group,
Okay.
but most people know the other term.
A cappella.
No, a cappella means no music, but
4-part harmony.
no, there's another international group.
Sweet Adelines.
Sweet Adelines.
There you go.
That's
Right.
what most
Third time's
people.
a charm.
Yes.
That's what most people know, Sweet Adelines, as,
Yeah.
and those are all ladies singing groups, choruses.
And do you go to outside the immediate area to concertize?
We sing for different, a lot of retirement groups. We were just at Merrimack Bluffs. We've sung at the Gatesworth, those kind of places. We also compete in an area-wide thing. We're going to Chicago in June to compete, and then like every 6 years that group comes here and we have to host that. We sing mainly around in the area. I don't know where else we've been. Mainly retirement places are the kind of thing. I think we're singing at Maryland Heights Community Center in September, maybe.
How big is your group?
There's between 20 and 25. Kind of fluctuates with who's, moving in or moving out or whatever. But we're always looking for more. Anybody sing? Want to sing?
I wish I could sing better. I mean, I love to sing, but I could never read music and really just sing my own.
We have a good time. It's very much
I bet it is.
of a family group kind of thing. We meet every Tuesday night, so it's a lot of time is spent with those people, and we do other things. We're getting a group up to go to the Community Helping Ministries trivia night, so we try to participate in other things to help other groups also.
Well, we really appreciate your time today, and I hope you will continue to enjoy living here. Your house is beautiful, and I thank you for letting us come over.
We're very happy to have had you. I've been in Bridgeton a long time, so I'm happy that I can pass on any knowledge I have about what it used to be like.
Thank you.